Radio.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Okay, ready for the after lunch session, so no snoozing. Welcome, Ming Johanson.
That's good.
Who describes herself as the mother of unicorns. Ming works with a number of businesses across the globe, varying sizes, training in social media, shaping landscape changes to adapt their management, sales and marketing culture so that it fits into the modern day world of hyper-connectivity. In her spare time, Ming is also an elected board member of the Western Australian branch of the ACS, Australian Computer Society, regular contributor and commentator of the Australian media in tech, a mentor at startup weekends in Perth, and an ambassador for in mental health for Are You OK? How do you feel with that?
Something overachiever.
Yeah. That's a great intro to hand over to me. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you everybody for actually voting for my talk. I'm really, really humbled to be here, especially because you all voted for me, and I'm a little bit confronted by the fact that there's lots of faces now staring at me, and I now have to actually give some sort of semblance of a good talk. If you haven't noticed, I'm a little bit nervous, but that's not because I'm scared of talking, it's just I have anxiety. So I'm always in this state of anxiety all the time. Sometimes I'll say really intelligent things. If you could capture them onto the internet and trap them in a tweet, that would be wonderful. Thank you. So today I'm talking about unconscious bias. Just be warned, there is a lot of gifs of cats because I like cats. I'm testing the room really as to see who are dog people. I'm expecting half of the audience to walk out of the room. So I want to be clear on the definition of unconscious bias, and I also want to not box it around just gender or race, because there's lots of unconscious bias about lots of different things, and it doesn't just have to be about gender or race. So, first of all, thanks to our sponsors. If it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be able to run events like this. I know in Perth, the cost of the ticket price barely covers the cost of food. So sponsors like this allow for stuff like this to happen, which is cool. And I get to stand on stage, which is even more awesome. So who am I? Hi, I'm from the internet. Sup? So I have a diagnosis of anxiety PTSD disorder. I usually say that in the room, usually at the very beginning, because there's somebody in the room that needs to see the evidence that they can actually stand on stage and give silly talks, like me. I grew up in an environment of child abuse for the first 17 years of my life. And that was a lot of unpicking and unpacking and lots of therapy to be able to function as a normal human being. I'm also Australian-born Chinese Swedish, which means I'm kind of like a cheap Asian IKEA knockoff. And I'm an introvert, which surprises people because I'm standing on stage and everybody has this idea that only extroverts stand on stage. I'm strategic about it. This way I only have to talk to all of you all at once. Only once. And also I'm closest to the exits. So if there's a fire, I'll be the one running. And also it gives me control of the room. So I actually feel the safest on stage, ironically. I, last month, won a thing. It was a really cool thing, but and I'm going to share a little bit of a story around that. So I was voted in the top 20 women who for their contributions to industry, and I was recognised out of 188 women. I was recognised as the top 20, which was, and I'm still a nervous wreck about that. So we're going to talk about that a little bit later. I'm also in the media a lot because people let me on the radio. Fools. I'm also an ambassador for Are You OK? So I talk about mental health, and it's a really important topic for me, which is leading into why this is a really important topic, as unconscious bias is an important topic. So, why am I invested in this? So as a result of a tragedy that happened about almost 6 years ago, I lost a fiance in a motorcycle accident, very suddenly, and it was pretty catastrophic. And one of the things I learned pretty hard and fast was society doesn't really like having conversations about grief or mental health or anxiety. They don't really handle conversations about death. Instead of asking me about his life, I got asked questions about how he died on repeat for about 4 months solid, which was only serving to re-traumatise me. And so this became a really important topic for me in terms of dealing with why we have bias around particular topics or why we struggle to have certain types of conversations. The other reason is I'm in the media a lot. And the media has a lot of bias, especially around technology. Games are bad. They're so addictive. The media has a particular lens that they try and push, and so part of the reason why I'm in the media is to combat that and challenge that and present a different opinion, because technology is cool. I love it. It enables me in a million different ways to run a business, even though I have a diagnosis for PTSD and anxiety disorder. One of the other things is people have a fear of technology. And the more that they're on a lower socioeconomic spectrum, the more they fear technology and replacement. They have a bias towards tech. And I want to change that and challenge that. So, my journey. So I've already shared a little bit of it. The thing about grief is it has this really wonderful habit of unboxing all of your other stuff that you put into little boxes. And then you put those little boxes in a basement, and in your brain you throw it away into a black hole, hoping that you would never have to deal with it. And grief has a wonderful habit of unraveling all of those boxes all at once. So all the trauma from my childhood, all the stuff I had to deal with in terms of racism growing up in Australia, I had to face as an adult as a result of grief. So, I learnt that I had some pretty awful unconscious beliefs about myself. So, I'm not worthy. This is a big one for me. I burst into tears on stage, accepting that award. And everybody's like, oh, so cute. You're so humble. No, I was having a PTSD response. Because in my childhood, any time I ever won something or I was successful in something, it would result in an incredibly violent environment. I was never safe in success. And so now, being safe in success as an adult is a real challenge. And while I was working really hard, and I work really hard on this belief all the time, I'm constantly challenging it. Even right now, I'm like shaking because I'm acknowledging that I want a thing, and I'm like, when's the grenade coming? My leaders, so when I worked in a major telecommunications company in Australia, I was one of the fastest assistant managers to get promoted within the organisation, and I was one of the youngest. And I was woman. Off colour. It's pretty good for the quota. And then when I hit management, I got turned down for the role because I was too bubbly. I want to ask you a question. If I were a man, would I have ever been called that? No. I would be called charismatic, energetic, a leader. It wouldn't have been a negative lens in that role. Now, I'm annoying and I don't let things like that annoy me, and I put them into what I call the stupid box. When people say stupid things to me, I just go in the stupid box. And I'm just persistent and annoying, and I wear people down until they give me the thing. So eventually I ended up in management. After a long series of wearing down. But it wouldn't be until some years later that I would realise that that phrase was making me feel small. that because of a personality trait, I wasn't worthy of being a leader. So, where and why do we form our unconscious bias? I feel like I skipped a slide. No, I didn't. So our brains process something in the realm of 400 billion bits of information every second. It's a lot of information. In order to process that much information in a short amount of time, what we actually do is we delete, distort, and generalize. And we delete, distort, and generalize based on our environment that we grew up in, our education, what our parents said around us, what people said about us. My mum used to say all the time I was really shy. Oh, it's Ming, she's just shy. And so what did I do? I started to mirror that. I would go to the library and hang out with all the shy kids, because that's what shy kids do. So between the ages of 0 and 5, that's where we form our identity. What do you know when you're 5? Not a hell of a lot. So then between 5 and 6, 7, through to about 15, we then find evidence to back up the story that we tell about ourselves. That bias that we have about ourselves. And other things, and other people, and leaders, and everything that we listen to. So, let's do a quick activity. I'm basically going to say a phrase, and I want you to fill in the blank. For example, unicorns are, fill in the blank. Just write it down. You don't have to yell it out. So we're going to go through an exercise, and I'm going to go through a few different things. We're going to go through 4 or 5 different things. We're going to fill in the blank from the statement, and I want you to write down the first answer. Don't correct it. What's the first answer? Leaders are. Fill in the blank. Superheroes are. Money is. Now, depending on your environment, depending on your background, depending on all the different things that contributed to your childhood from up until about the age of 5, you're going to have a series of different answers. I picked the money one because it's non-gendered. So if you have a negative belief bias around money, you might think money's really hard to get. Or you have to sacrifice a lot. That was a lesson I learned when I was a kid. You have to sacrifice a lot in order to get a lot of money. So it meant that I had to sacrifice a lot with my family in order to win here. Not true. But when you learn that from your environment, all you do is you find the evidence to back it up. I actually have a series of 32 questions, which I run through in a training process that Amy has done, which is really hard. And we go through that unconscious bias that comes up. I've had situations where men have replied to the question of fathers are, insert blank, absent. He wasn't talking about his own father. He was talking about his relationship with his kids. So, how do we manage our bias? Well, so first of all, cut yourselves a break. The fact that we formed this between the ages of 0 and 5, we should be allowed to evolve. And it's really hard sometimes to be aware of your unconscious bias because it's unconscious. Being aware of your bias, sometimes it'll take an event. So for me, it was grief and it was death. For me to start being aware of my bias. I have a huge bias around people with anxiety. I actually went back to every single person who was a friend who I'd told them to just get over it. I went back to every single one of them and said, I'm so sorry. Because I didn't know. I hadn't gone through it. How would I know? Or I didn't know that I'd been experiencing anxiety, and that wasn't something that everybody else experienced. Ask yourself a question. Is it true? Is it an absolute truth? Or is it a generalization? I used to be that when I was dating, not dating anymore, I'm off the market now, sorry. But when I was dating, I had a belief that men are bad. All men are bad. Men suck. And so what would I do? I would create situations where I would create evidence that men were bad. Because that kept me safe. That belief kept me safe. Because in my experience, I'd had really bad experiences with men. Now I have a wonderful partner who's amazing, cooks for me. It's fantastic. Create relationships with people who will point out your bias in a safe environment. So I actually have a lot of men in my network who come to me and try and work out a lot of their bias that they have about themselves and about women, because they know they can be safe with me in that conversation and I won't judge them. When we come across somebody else's bias, have you met the internet? Remember, forcing your bias on somebody else, good or bad, it's a setup. It's trying to put a square block into a circle hole. It doesn't quite work. Instead, and understanding that those biases form our identity as well. And when we're questioned on our identity, we tend to go into fight, flight, or freeze. So instead, asking questions to come to a better understanding of somebody else's bias. You don't know their map of experiences that got them to where they are right now. You don't know their childhood experiences. We make an assumption, an unconscious bias, that everybody else has had the same upbringing, same life, same experiences, up until the point that we met that person. It's not the case. There is, in leadership, there is a conversation that we constantly have about operating above the line as opposed to below the line. When we operate below the line, we operate in a way where we're in reaction. We're reacting to somebody else rather than having a conversation and engaging in a conversation. Because that's where change happens, is where the conversation happens. Not shouting at each other, not typing in all caps on the internet. So when it feels uncomfortable, and I had a conversation with somebody earlier, I was talking about how somebody was asking for her credentials. It's like, oh, you know, what's your role? Why are you here in this meeting? You know, who are you? What's your role? And we tend to go into immediate justification. And the response that I gave her was the right role. I have the right role for this meeting. So you can't just stop believing your unconscious bias. Let's be realists here. We've all had these beliefs for 30 plus years, some of us a bit longer, but you can replace them. It's not about just going, okay, all right, well, I get rid of all of my beliefs, but we have to replace and correct and adjust. There's a simple language change that I talk about a lot in terms of things that we say. Need to, got to, have to, must. These are things that we're told from a very young age. You need to get a good education. If you get a good education, then you'll get a good job. And if you get a good job, then you'll be happy. If you make lots of money, you'll succeed. If you win all the prizes, you'll do great. And yet we have a mass of depression and mental health problems in Australia. So there's nothing you need to, have to, got to do. Nothing. It's all choice. You can choose to or want to. I have another client who, in the space of about 20 minutes, she said each of those words, need to, got to, have to, must, about 107 times in the space of about 20 minutes. Can you imagine how much pressure and stress you feel after you've been telling yourself you need to do a thing? And the funny bit about her was she was rebelling against herself. She was like, I need to do a thing. And then she's like, no, you don't. And she wouldn't do it. And she would wonder why she would be on this perpetual hamster wheel of never getting ahead. Because she was rebelling against herself. Mantras to reframe your unconscious bias. I have a picture of it, but I'll put it on Twitter. I actually have a whole bunch of mantras that I've got written on my mirror to reframe a lot of my own internal language, especially around things like you're a failure, you're not good enough. And one of the things I have written on my mirror is you give the words back to people when they lose the song. This is the opportunity that you have to do that for yourselves and for others. Thanks so much, guys.